And welcome to the bonus clue for the Ocean Moon Shawl Mystery Knit Along. Here it is, voila, constellations. Embroider a constellation or a galaxy. I wanted to add a little extra to the option B shawl, which is plain for that top section. And this will also be perfect for the option A. You'll be able to add some stars above the moons quite readily. In these spaces here, or among the stars. I have a bit of background noise, I'm afraid. The neighbours are busy working on their backyard, and it's hard to find a spot where they're not operating machinery. So sorry if you hear a bit of grinding and machinery in the background. Hopefully it's not too loud. With this clue, I've added some constellation charts, some astrology charts. So there's 12 for each of the star signs. I thought it might be fun to choose a couple that are relevant to you and your favourite people. Or in the case of mine, I've actually added all 12 to create a little bit of a constellation flow here. I started at this side with Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, and about the centre here I'll place Libra, and then Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. And I could add perhaps a few more stars around if I feel like filling it up some more, but I think there's quite a bit here. By the time Libra's added, it'll be a nice flow of constellations across the shawl. Initially, I thought I might just add 3, one for each of our family. But I found that I just wanted to do them all, try them all out, and they look good, I think, across the shawl. So you could go online and find some other charts if there's other constellations you'd like to include, anything that's particularly meaningful to you. Or you could just freestyle and add stars and just make it more decorative. It's up to you what you'd enjoy doing. I think it'd be lovely to add sequins to these as well. I wanted to keep it fairly simple for the tutorial, and I'm just using the yarn that I had used for the lace. So yeah, really your imagination is your limit with this. To work out the layout, I cut out each of the constellations and just sort of set them out on the shawl to see how they would fit. If you wanted these bigger, you could enlarge them before printing them. I just stuck with a fairly modest size for these, and that way they can all fit if you want to have all 12. So Libra is the one I'll be working on to demonstrate the techniques I used. I'm not really an embroiderer, and I think embroidering on knitting like this on garter stitch is a little bit tricky, a bit fiddly. It took me a few constellations to get the hang of it, and I undid my practice constellations. So I did them on here, and some I just found were too close. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a fiddly thing. It takes some time. Don't be afraid to rip it out, undo it, and redo it if you're not happy with it. If you're a novice embroiderer like myself, just take your time. These aren't, I wouldn't say, particularly perfect, but I like the effect. I like that kind of handmade-y look to them. If you really wanted it neater, you could probably just do beads and a darker thread that would match on the back. Yeah, there's lots of options. It's just a fun idea to add to your project. The back is a little bit messy, not as nice as the front. I'm sure some of you might have better ideas than me about how to manage that, but I think it's fine given that the front of the shawl will be neat and quite okay in my opinion, but yeah, full disclosure of the back part. I guess for it to be super neat, you could do each star individually and then just weave into that on the back, and then you just have little dots on the back. But that would be incredibly time consuming. So I'm going to show you what I did, which was just a couple of ways of doing stars, or really the same technique modified for different sizes. I found it much easier to work with my shawl upside down, and so make sure that the constellation is the right way. And I'll zoom in and show you how I did it. For this I used a length, maybe about a yard of thread for each constellation, a tapestry needle. And I tried a few ways to figure out how to mark the chart. And initially I thought I'd poke pins through and then poke them through the other side. And I was using sewing pins and they kept falling out. So I tried a couple of ideas and I found that these lockable stitch markers made it the easiest for me. So what I did was locate where I want the constellation on my project and then use a tapestry needle to poke through the shawl and that bit of paper. And then I came in with the locking stitch marker and just placed it where I had poked through. And I repeated that mainly for the bigger stars. For some of the constellations there, they've got quite a lot of stars, so I might have just done it for some of the main points. And that just helped me stay on track while sewing the constellations. So I'll do that again here. And there's still a little bit of organic wriggle room, I think. These are probably not completely scientifically accurate. It depends how important that is to you or not. Bit of a general feeling. So that one ended up maybe. Redo that. They do shift a bit. Fortunately, the nice bright thread contrasts well against the dark background, so it's all quite easy to see. And the last one here. So I've missed these couple of smaller ones. And then I just keep the chart there for reference while I'm doing the embroidery part. With this, if I start here or here, I can work across that whole flow. I did a few experiments where I added little stitches between, or considered even adding a long stitch in between the stars. And I love the look of those. I love the look of that line added, but I found it just didn't translate well with the thick thread and the squishy garter stitch. I tried doing little dots across there, and again, I didn't mind the look of them, but it just got a little confused. So in the end, I just decided to focus on the actual stars. I think you could come back with a finer thread and work it. That might look nice. I'm sure plenty of you'll all have lots of wonderful ideas how to add your own amazingness to this project. So the first star I'll start here, which is this pin. The pin kind of marks the center of the star, so when I poke my needle up, I'll poke either below or above. And the circles indicate the size of the star. So the larger circle, I'll make a larger star, and a smaller circle, a smaller star. The smaller stars vary a bit from a single stitch, depending on how busy the constellation is, to sometimes a couple of stitches, or even more, 3 stitches. Essentially, I'm working a stitch across, and usually 6 stitches in, it's 3 stitches in total for a 6-pointed star in most cases. Sometimes a little more, sometimes I might sew a little bit over the center and add to the star in that way. It's pretty much a by feel kind of thing, what looks good for that particular star. But as I said, I have ripped plenty out. I've tried a few variations. Initially I tried some French knots, doing little dots for stars, and I found this to be my most successful. So I come underneath, with this star, it's a bigger star, I'm going to come a bit below that stitch marker. We've got some noise out there again. And keep a good tail to hold on to. And even later on, that tail can be used to add a center stitch to the star, perhaps if you want to, and help secure it in place. Take that stitch marker off. And then I'll come up a reasonable way to form that first line. I found pulling the stitches, you don't want to pull them too tight, but they do shrink the stitch a bit. So if you, for example, put the needle up there, that looks quite large, but by the time you've sewn it and pulled it, it's smaller than you think it will be. So for the 6-pointed star, instead of going across and making a cross, I'll go on a diagonal and have 2 diagonal stitches running across that center stitch. So I'll come down a little bit up from that bottom stitch and across and pull that through. So that's a fairly good size for a large star. And then I'll come over to a similar place on the opposite side here. Being careful to make sure I go far enough away so that when that stitch is pulled tight, it doesn't end up really close to this. And if the stitch is in the wrong spot, it's so easy to pull it out and just rework that stitch again. So then I poked the needle in and have come across to this side so that I can form the star line across in the opposite direction. Like so. And then I'll come in and that will be that star. Unless I decide I want to add a little bit more to it. Could even add little dots radiating out so it's all shiny. Or as I said, could potentially add a center stitch there. I'm pretty happy with that star. I think that's cute. So then I'll turn the work upside down and just secure it in place with a stitch through the garter edge underneath. Do that a couple of times, as long as I'm happy with it. But still, it's easy enough to pull out the stitches and redo them. Okay, so that's star number 1. Now, a smaller star. Looking at my little chart, it's about here. And then this will come up here. So I'll bring the needle up and under and through for that little star. And I do find I keep just sort of playing with the stars as I go. For a smaller star, I would either do a little stitch or a small cross, just doing 2 stitches. So I'll do a 2-stitch star here. So come across, insert the needle and then poke it up here, and the same down. And again, I can flip it over and secure that little stitch, just make sure I'm happy with it. Little cross. Perhaps looking at that, I could probably fit in another little small strand across there. Yeah, that's cute. I'll keep that. It is a pretty organic process. This is not highly technical, just about having a bit of fun and doing something different. So we have this star and this star now. And we're coming up here to this one. So again, I'll start a bit below that marked stitch and take out the marker. And I'm going to work a larger star again this time. So bring the yarn in and then across over to the left, slightly up. And across to the top right, slightly up, and then back over to the top left. It's a little bit of a square configuration, these stitches. Now that's probably not in the best spot there. So I found the easiest way to pull it out is just to take the needle out and pull it back through there. So I need to come across a bit further that way to make that look more even. So it's a little bit of trial and error, you'll get a feel for it. Don't be discouraged if they don't look perfect straight away. Mine certainly didn't. And don't still. And then back down to the opposite here. Pull that through and see how it looks. So I pulled it a bit tight, let it loosen up a bit. That's pretty cute. All right, I'll secure that one. The circles is 3 different size circles indicated on the charts that I've supplied. Sorry, I've got some loud banging out there now. 3 different size circles. You can see 2 of them here. I think there's just a couple of places where there's a larger one. I think it's just about playing some of these stars. There's the same size circle in the chart, but I could make some of them a bit bigger or a bit smaller, depending on how it's kind of turning out and how I want it to look. So this next one is also a biggish one. So I've got my yarn, I'll bring it under and to a little bit under where this marker is. And perhaps this time I will make a larger one. So I'll do, instead of 6 strands or 3 stitches, I'll do 4 stitches, which will be 8 points to the star. So in which case I came under and then directly between in the center there on the left, and then I'll come over to the right to that same place in the center. And then back over to the top left in between those 2. Let's see how that looks. probably could have come a little bit further over for that stitch, so I'll come back and do that again. Yes. And then back up there. That's better. So it just takes a moment to go back and fix that. I have pulled out the whole constellation if I wasn't happy with it. It's just about fiddling and practice. I'm sure some of you are quite proficient at embroidery though, and will have some ideas. Down to the bottom right center, up through the bottom left, and then I'm going to come back through here. So a bigger twinkling star here. Turn it over and just secure that underneath. We have the tail of the starter yarn there. Okay. Next star is another big one down here. So I'll repeat that process. I think I'll do a 3-stitch star, 6 points. Take that down. Doesn't matter that I sewed over that marker because I can just pull it out. And I love how the speckled yarn adds that bit of sparkle. All right, down to the bottom right. I've gone a different direction this time. I came up through the top first. How's that looking? Probably could have come up slightly higher with that stitch. So I'll come up a bit higher. There. And that's the large stitch here, and then not marked is a smaller one. So come down here and then down. So I will go to approximately that place and work a smaller stitch. I'll do a little 2-stitch cross. Now I don't want to poke it through the white yarn underneath, because if I do want to pull it out, it will make it a little bit trickier. There we go. Just secure that stitch underneath. Little finesse. And the last stitch of our constellation. Again, I'll come under that stitch marker. And I'll do another 3-stitch star. So that come up down a bit to the right, or come to the left, down a bit to the left, or come down a bit to the bottom left, and go up first. Across and back under. And up. And give that a little secure stitch on the back. And then it's just a matter of weaving in those ends. I left it till last. I did all the stars first and made sure I was happy, all the constellations with where they sat. And even with this long thread, if I wanted to add a few more stars about the shawl, I could come back and use those to do that as a kind of afterthought if I want to. So it took me a while to get the hang of it, a little bit of practice, but I really think it's a fun flourish. As I said, the speckle yarn, I love how it adds just that little different twinkle to the project, but a solid coloured yarn will be as effective too. I look forward to seeing your constellations and galaxies appear.